The strangest thing about procrastination is this: sometimes the people who put things off the most aren't the ones who care the least. They care so much that the task feels heavy before they even begin. So they delay, not because it means nothing, but because it means too much. And after a while, what started as postponing quietly turns into shame, exhaustion, and that unsettling feeling of losing your direction inside your own life. To understand that contradiction, we have to look at what the brain does when pressure, emotion, and depleted energy all collide at once. Most people have said some version of the same thing to themselves at least once. I'm lazy, I have no discipline. Other people can do this, so why can't I? It sounds blunt, almost practical, as if self-criticism might finally force you into motion. But very often it does the opposite. The harsher that inner voice becomes, the heavier the task starts to feel. What was once just an email, a chapter, a decision, or a difficult conversation begins to feel like a verdict on who you are. That is why procrastination is so often misunderstood. From the outside, it looks simple. A person has something to do and they do not do it. Case closed. But inside the mind, the picture is much stranger than that. There may be dread, perfectionism, emotional fatigue, uncertainty, fear of failure, fear of being seen, or even fear of discovering that the life you built no longer feels like your own. In those moments, delay is not always a sign that you do not care. Sometimes it is a sign that the task has become tangled up with too much emotion. There is a deeply human irony in that. The things that matter most are often the hardest to start. Not because they are meaningless, but because they carry weight. You want them to go well. You want them to prove something. You want them to justify the effort, the identity, the hope you have attached to them. And the more meaning you load into one task, the more threatening it can begin to feel. So the mind starts looking for relief. Just for a moment, it says. Just a few minutes, one more scroll, a little tidying up, a few messages answered, a cup of coffee, a quick check of something irrelevant but strangely urgent. The document opens, then closes. The day keeps moving. Nothing dramatic happens, and yet something is being reinforced. Because every time you avoid a task that feels emotionally heavy, the discomfort drops for a moment, the pressure eases, the dread softens. Your nervous system notices that shift immediately, and the brain, clever in all the wrong ways, starts learning from it. It begins to associate avoidance with relief. Not long-term freedom, of course, just short-term relief. But in a tired mind, short-term relief can feel like the only language that still makes sense. That is why procrastination often survives knowledge. People usually know what they should do. They know the deadline, they know the steps, they know what delay will cost them. The problem is not always ignorance. The problem is that the emotional cost of starting has become too high. There are mornings when exhaustion shows up before the day has even properly started. The list is still unopened, yet the body already feels resistant. The chest is tight, the mind is foggy. Even the smallest task seems to arrive with invisible weight attached to it. At that point, beginning no longer feels like pressing a button. It feels like trying to lift a stone with depleted hands. And once that pattern repeats, it rarely stays small. You postpone one thing, then you carry the guilt of it into the next day. Now the task is no longer just the task. It also contains yesterday's disappointment and the day before that, and the memory of every time you promised yourself you were finally going to get back on track. The work grows not only in size but in emotional density. That is when people start saying they have lost motivation. But motivation does not always disappear in one dramatic collapse. more often it erodes. First, you simply struggle to begin. Then you stop feeling excited by things that once mattered. Then you start moving through your routine with less spark, less belief, less connection. And eventually, a more unsettling question begins hovering in the background. What am I even moving toward anymore? This is where procrastination starts touching something deeper than productivity. It begins to affect identity, not just what you are doing, but how you see yourself. At first, the thought is, I didn't manage today. Later, it becomes, I'm the kind of person who never manages. A temporary behavior hardens into a personal definition. And once that happens, every new beginning feels burdened by an old sentence already spoken inside the mind. From a brain science perspective, none of this is especially mysterious. The brain is not some noble machine designed to choose the wisest long-term path in every moment. Very often, it is simply trying to reduce discomfort in the present. If a task is linked with pressure, ambiguity, self-doubt, or the possibility of failure, the brain may treat it less like an opportunity and more like a threat. And when your mental energy is already low, it becomes even more tempting to reach for whatever offers immediate reward or that immediate escape. That is why some people look busy all day and still in the evening with that hollow feeling that nothing important actually moved. They were not doing nothing. They were doing many things, just not the one thing carrying the most emotional charge. Procrastination does not always look like obvious idleness. Sometimes it wears the costume of productivity. You organize, optimize, answer, prepare, rearrange, and refine, all to avoid touching the part that actually scares you. Another form of delay comes from vagueness. When a task is too large, too abstract, or too undefined, the mind struggles to get a grip on it. Write the thought, dissertation, change careers, fix your life. Those are not beginnings, they are fog. And the brain does not do well with fog. It prefers clear edges, visible steps, simple entry points. When those are missing, avoidance becomes more likely, not because you are incapable, but because the starting line is hidden. Then there is decision fatigue, that quiet thief of momentum. Sometimes the hardest part is not the work itself, but the number of choices wrapped around it. Where do I start? What matters most? Is this the right approach? How long will this take? What if I choose wrong? What if it's already too late? Each question costs energy. Each fork in the road asks the mind to spend something, and by the time action is required, the system already feels worn down. Burnout often enters through this same door. Not always with a dramatic breakdown, not always with tears, collapse, or some visible crisis. Sometimes it arrives quietly. You keep functioning, you keep replying, you keep showing up. You do what is necessary, maybe even what is expected, but inwardly the connection is fading. The things that once felt meaningful now feel mechanical. The goals that once gave you direction now feel like obligations dragging behind you. When that happens, loss of motivation is no longer about one difficult week. It starts brushing up against meaning itself. You begin to wonder whether the problem is your work, your pace, your expectations, or the fact that you have been living under constant pressure for too long. There are people who are not short on talent at all. They are simply trying to function with a nervous system that has been stretched too thin for too long. And this part matters. Understanding the mechanism is not the same as excusing everything. It is not permission to drift forever. It is a way of stopping the wrong fight. Because if the roots of the problem are overwhelm, ambiguity, fear, exhaustion, and disconnection, then the answer cannot just be more self-hatred. Punishment may create a burst of movement once in a while, but it rarely builds a stable path back. The first shift is often conceptual. Maybe you are not broken. Maybe you are not failing in some moral sense. Maybe you are caught inside a loop your brain learned in order to protect you from feelings it did not know how to handle. And if it is a loop, then it can be loosened one knot at a time. Not through grand declarations, not through the fantasy of becoming a different person overnight, but by making the beginning smaller, clearer, lighter, and less threatening. Instead of telling yourself to finish everything, find the first honest step. Instead of trying to rebuild your whole life in one desperate burst, choose the smallest action that still counts as real. Instead of waiting to feel inspired, shape the environment so the first step is already within reach when you sit down. Instead of asking why you have no motivation, ask what exactly feels unsafe, foggy, or unbearably heavy about starting. Sometimes the answer is fatigue. Sometimes it is fear of doing it badly. Sometimes it is the grief of no longer believing in the path you are on. Sometimes it is simply the weariness of being pushed inwardly or outwardly for too long. And sometimes what you need is not another productivity trick at all, but actual recovery. That recovery can sound almost insultingly basic, which is probably why people dismiss it. Sleep, rest, a steadier rhythm, a body that is not constantly overstimulated, a walk long enough for the mind to unclench, a conversation honest enough to interrupt the isolation of your own thoughts, a moment of admitting that a depleted nervous system cannot be bullied into acting like a well-rested one. Then, very quietly, motivation tends to return in a humbler form than people expect. Not like lightning, not like some cinematic surge, more like a small restoration of trust. You sit down for 5 minutes, you write one paragraph, you reopen a file, you send the message, you complete one tiny thing, and the body registers a surprising truth. I can still move. That moment matters more than it seems, because what prolonged procrastination often damages most is not the schedule, but self-trust. You do not only lose time, you lose the sense that you are someone you can rely on. So each small act of follow-through is not merely practical, it is relational. It is a stitch in the torn fabric between you and yourself. There will still be days when you slip, days when the old pattern comes back wearing a familiar face. That does not mean nothing has changed. Real change is rarely theatrical. People do not recover in a clean line from chaos to mastery. They recover by understanding themselves more accurately, by becoming less brutal with themselves, and by coming back once more, then once more again. And if you have been depleted for a long time, if the state is affecting your sleep, your work, your appetite, your relationships, or your basic sense of being alive inside your own life, it may be worth reaching out to a therapist, a doctor, or someone trustworthy who can help you see what is hard to see alone, not because you are weak, because some mazes are easier to leave when someone else helps you notice where the walls really are. Maybe the most important thing to remember is not simply stop procrastinating. It is this: behind procrastination, there's often an emotion not yet processed, a fear not yet named, or a level of exhaustion not yet admitted. Once you begin to see that, you stop treating yourself like the enemy, and that is often where real movement begins. Maybe today you will not fix everything. Maybe you will not rebuild your whole life by tonight, but maybe you can begin with one task small enough that your body does not panic, one step clear enough that your mind does not drown in fog, one action real enough to remind you that you are still here, still capable, still able to move. And sometimes that is exactly how motivation comes back. Not when you finally feel perfect, ready, disciplined, and fearless, but when you soften toward yourself just enough to begin, however small that beginning may be.